Say Namaha. We're reading from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita from Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami Maharaj and purports from O. Vishnupad Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are at Madhya Lila chapter 6, the liberation of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Verse 55. Hearing that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu belonged to the Nadia district, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya became very pleased and addressed the Lord as follows. You are naturally respectable, besides you are a sannyasi, thus I wish you to become your personal servant. As soon as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard this from the Bhattacharya, he immediately remembered Lord Vishnu and began to speak humbly to him as follows. Because you are a teacher of Vedanta philosophy, you are the master of all the people in the world and their well-wisher. As well, you are also the benefactor of all kinds of sannyasis. I am a young sannyasi, and I actually have no knowledge of what is good and what is bad. Therefore, I am taking shelter of you and accepting you as my spiritual master. I have come here only to associate with you, and I am now taking shelter of you. Will you kindly maintain me in all respects? The incident that happened today was a great obstacle for me, but you have kindly relieved me of it. The Bhattacharya replied, Do not go alone to see the deity at the Jagannath temple. It is better that you go with me or my man. The Lord said, I shall never enter the temple, but shall always view the Lord from the side of the Garuda Stampa. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya then told Gopinathacharya, Take Goswamiji and show him Lord Jagannath. Also the apartment belonging to my maternal aunt is in a very solitary place. Make all arrangements for him to stay there. Thus Gopinathacharya took Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to his residential quarters and showed him where to find water, tubes and water pots. Indeed, he arranged everything. The next day, Gopinathacharya took Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to see the early rising of Lord Jagannath. Gopinathacharya then took Mukundadatta with him and went to Sarvabhauma's house. When they arrived, Sarvabhauma addressed Mukundadatta as follows. The sannyasi is very meek and humble by nature, and his person is very beautiful to see. Consequently, my affection for him increases. From which sampradaya has he accepted the sannyas order, and what is his name? Gopinathacharya replied, The Lord's name is Sri Krishna Chaitanya, and his sannyas preceptor is the greatly fortunate Keshava Bharati. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, Sri Krishna is a very good name, but he belongs to the Bharati community. Therefore, he is a second-class sannyasi. Gopinathacharya replied, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu does not rely on any external formality. There is no need to him to accept the sannyas order from a superior sampradaya. The Bhattacharya inquired, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is in his full-fledged, youthful life. How can he keep the principles of sannyas? I shall continually recite Vedanta philosophy before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu so that he may remain fixed in his renunciation and thus enter upon the path of monism. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya then suggested, if Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would like, I could bring him into a first-class sampradaya by offering him saffron cloth and performing the reformatory process again. Gopinathacharya and Mukundadatta became very unhappy when they heard this. Gopinathacharya therefore addressed Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya as follows. My dear Bhattacharya, you do not know the greatness of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. All the symptoms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are found in him to the highest degree. Gopinathacharya continued, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is celebrated as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Those who are ignorant in this connection find the conclusion of knowledge, man, very difficult to understand. Find the conclusion of knowledgeable man very difficult to understand. The disciple of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya retaliated. By what evidence do you conclude that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Lord? Gopinathacharya replied, the statements of authorized acharyas who understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead are proof. The disciple of the Bhattacharya said, we derive knowledge of the absolute truth by logical hypothesis. Gopinath Acharya replied, one cannot attain real knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by such logical hypothesis and argument. Gopinath Acharya continued, one can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead only by his mercy, not by guesswork or hypothesis. The Acharya continued, if one receives but a tiny bit of the Lord's favor by dint of devotional service, he can understand the nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. My Lord, if one is favored by even a slight trace of the mercy of your lotus feet, he can understand the greatness of your personality. But those who speculate in order to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead are unable to know you, even though they continue to study the Vedas for many years. Gopinath Acharya then addressed Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. You are a great scholar and a teacher of many disciples. Indeed, there is no other scholar like you on earth. Nonetheless, because you are bereft of even a pinch of the Lord's mercy, you cannot understand him, even though he is present in your home. It is not your fault, it is the verdict of the scriptures. You cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead simply by scholarship. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya replied, my dear Gopinath Acharya, please speak with great care. What is the proof that you have received the mercy of the Lord? Gopinath Acharya replied, knowledge of the summum bonum, the absolute truth, is evidence of the mercy of the Supreme Lord. Gopinath Acharya continued, you have seen the symptoms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the body of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu during his absorption in an ecstatic mood. Despite directly perceiving the symptoms of the Supreme Lord in the body of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you cannot understand him. This is commonly called illusion. A person influenced by the external energy is called Bahir Mukha Jnana, a mundane person, because despite his perception, he cannot understand the real substance. Hearing Gopinath Acharya say this, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya smiled and began to speak as follows. Excuse me. The Bhattacharya said, "We are just having a discussion amongst friends and considering the points described in the scriptures. Do not become angry. I'm simply speaking on the strength of the Shastras. Please don't take any offense." Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is certainly a great uncommon devotee, but we cannot accept him as an incarnation of Lord Vishnu, because according to Shastra, there is no incarnation in this age of Kali. Another name for Lord Vishnu is Triyuga, because there is no incarnation of Lord Vishnu in Kali Yuga. Indeed, this is the verdict of the revealed scriptures. Upon hearing this, Gopinathacharya became very unhappy. He said to the Bhattacharya, "You consider yourself the knower of all Vedic scriptures. Srimad Bhagavatam and the Mahabharata are the two most important Vedic scriptures, but you have paid no attention to their statements. In Srimad Bhagavatam and the Mahabharata, it is stated that the Lord appears directly, but you say that in this age there is no manifestation or incarnation of Lord Vishnu. In this age of Kali, there is no Leela avatar of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, he is known as Triyuga. That is one of his holy names." Gopinathacharya continued, "There is certainly an incarnation in every age, and such an incarnation is called the Yuga avatar. But your heart has become so hardened by logic and argument that you cannot consider all these facts. In the past, your son has had bodies of 3 different colors, according to the age. These colors were white, red, and yellow. In this age, Dwapara Yuga, he has accepted a blackish body. In the age of Kali, as well as in Dwapara Yuga, the people offer prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead by various mantras and observe the regulative principles of the supplementary Vedic literatures. Now please hear of this from me. In this age of Kali, those who are intelligent perform the congregational chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who appears in this age, always describing the glories of Krishna. That incarnation is yellowish in hue and is always associated with his plenary expansions such as Sri Nityananda Prabhu and personal expansions such as Gadadhar, as well as his devotees and associates such as Swarup Damodar. The Lord in the incarnation of Gaurasundar has a golden complexion. Indeed, his entire body, which is very nicely constituted, is like molten gold. Sandalwood pulp is smeared all over his body. He will take the 4th order of spiritual life, sannyas, and will be very much self-controlled. He will be distinguished from Mayavadi sannyasis in that he will be fixed in devotional service and will spread the Sankirtan movement. Gopinathacharya then said, "There is no need to quote so much evidence from the Shastras, for you are a very dry speculator. There is no need to sow seeds in barren land. When the Lord will be pleased with you, you will also understand these conclusions and will quote from the Shastras. The false arguments and philosophical word jugglery of your disciples are not faults of theirs. They have simply received the benediction of Mayavadi philosophy. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is full of unlimited qualities and whose different potencies bring about agreement and disagreement between disputants. Thus, the illusory energy again and again covers the self-realization of both disputants. In almost all cases, whatever learned Brahmanas speak becomes accepted. Nothing is impossible for one who takes shelter of my illusory energy and speaks under her influence. After hearing this from Gopinathacharya, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, "First go to the place where Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is staying and invite him here with his associates. Ask him on my account. Take Jagannath Prasadam and first give it to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates. After that, come back here and teach me well." Gopinathacharya was the brother-in-law of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Therefore, their relationship was very sweet and intimate. Under the circumstances, Gopinathacharya taught him by sometimes blaspheming him, sometimes praising him, and sometimes laughing at him. This had been going on for some time. Sri Mukundadatta left and felt very satisfied to hear the conclusion statements of Gopinathacharya, but he became very unhappy and angry to hear the statements put forward by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. According to the instructions of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Gopinathacharya went to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and invited him on the Bhattacharya's behalf. The Bhattacharya's statements were discussed before Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Gopinathacharya and Mukundadatta disapproved of the Bhattacharya's statements because they caused mental pain. Hearing this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, "Do not speak like that. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya has shown great affection and mercy towards me. Out of paternal affection for me, he wants to protect me and see that I follow the regulative principles of a sannyasi. What fault is there in this?" The next morning, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya together visited the temple of Lord Jagannath. Both of them were in a very pleasant mood. When they entered the temple, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya offered Chaitanya Mahaprabhu a seat, while he himself sat down on the floor out of due respect for a sannyasi. He then began to instruct Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on Vedanta philosophy, and out of affection and devotion, he spoke to the Lord as follows. The Bhattacharya said, "Hearing Vedanta philosophy is a sannyasi's main business. Therefore, without hesitation, you should study Vedanta philosophy, hearing it without cessation from a superior person." Lord Chaitanya replied, "You are very merciful to me, and therefore I think it is my duty to obey your order." Thus for 7 days continually, Jai. Thus for 7 days continually, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu listened to the Vedanta philosophy expounded by Sri Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. However, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not say anything and did not indicate whether it was right or wrong. He simply sat there and listened to the Bhattacharya. On the 8th day, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, "You have been listening to Vedanta philosophy from me continually for 7 days. You have simply been listening, fixed in your silence. Since you do not say whether you think it is right or wrong, I cannot know whether you are actually understanding Vedanta philosophy or not." Sri Sri Guru Gauranga Sundar Radha Giridhara Ju Ki Jai. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu replied, I am a fool, and consequently I do not study the Vedanta Sutra. I'm just trying to hear it from you because you have ordered me. Only for the sake of executing the duties of the renounced order of sannyas do I listen. Unfortunately, I cannot in the least understand the meaning you are presenting. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya replied, I accept that you do not understand, yet even one who does not understand inquires about the subject matter. You are hearing again and again, yet you keep silent. I cannot understand what is actually within your mind. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then revealed his mind, saying, I can understand the meaning of each sutra very clearly, but your explanation have simply agitated my mind. The meaning of the aphorisms in the Vedanta Sutra contain clear purport in themselves, but other purports you presented simply covered the meaning of the sutras like a cloud. You do not explain the direct meaning of the Brahma Sutras. Indeed, it appears that your business is to cover their real meaning. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, the Vedanta Sutra is the summary of all the Upanishads. Therefore, whatever direct meaning is there in the Upanishad is also recorded in the Vedanta Sutra or Vyasa Sutra. For each sutra, the direct meaning must be accepted without interpretation. However, you simply abandon the direct meaning and proceed with your imaginative interpretation. Although there is other evidence, the evidence given in the Vedic version must be taken as foremost. Vedic versions understood directly are first-class evidence. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, conch shells and cow dung are nothing but the bones and the stool of some living entity. But according to the Vedic version, they are both considered very pure. The Vedic statements are self-evident. Whatever is stated there must be accepted. If we interpret it accordingly to our own imagination, the authority of the Vedas is immediately lost. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, the Brahma Sutra, compiled by Srila Vyasadeva, is as radiant as the sun. One who tries to interpret its meaning simply covers that sunshine with a cloud. All the Vedas and literature that strictly follows the Vedic principles explain that the Supreme Brahman is the Absolute Truth, the greatest of all and the feature of the Supreme Lord. Actually, the Supreme Absolute Truth is a person, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, full with all opulences. You are trying to explain him as impersonal and formless. Wherever there is an impersonal description in the Vedas mean to establish that everything belonging to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is transcendental and free of mundane characteristics. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, whatever Vedic mantras describe the Absolute Truth, impersonally only prove in the end that the Absolute Truth is a person. The Supreme Lord is understood in two features, impersonal and personal. If one considers the Supreme Personality of Godhead in both features, he can actually understand the Absolute Truth. He knows that the personal understanding is stronger because we see that everything is full of variety. No one can see anything that is not full of variety. Everything in the cosmic manifestation emanates from the absolute truth, remains in the absolute truth, and after annihilation again enters the absolute truth. The personal features of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are categorized in three cases, namely ablative, instrumental, and locative. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead wished to become many, he glanced over the material energy. Before the creation, there were no mundane eyes or mind. Therefore, the transcendental nature of the Absolute Truth's mind and eyes is confirmed. The word Brahman indicates the complete Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is Sri Krishna, who is the verdict of all Vedic literature. The confidential meaning of the Vedas is not easily understood by common men. Therefore, that meaning is supplemented by the words of the Puranas. How greatly fortunate are Nanda Maharaj, the coward man, and all the inhabitants of Brajabhumi. There is no limit to their fortune, because the Absolute Truth, the source of transcendental bliss, the eternal Supreme Brahman, has become their friend. The Vedic Apanipat mantra rejects material hands and legs, yet it states that the Lord goes very fast and accepts everything offered to him. All these mantras confirm that the Absolute Truth is personal, but the Mayavadis, throwing away the direct meaning, interpret the Absolute Truth as impersonal. Are you describing as formless that Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose transcendental form is complete with 6 transcendental opulences? The Supreme Personality of Godhead has 3 primary potencies. Are you trying to prove that he has no potencies? The internal potency of the Supreme Lord Vishnu is spiritual, as verified by the Shastras. There is another spiritual potency known as Kshetra Gyan, or the living entity. The third potency, which is known as nescience, makes the living entity godless and fills him with fruitive activity. O King, the Kshetra Gyan Shakti is the living entity. Although he has the facility to live in either the material or spiritual world, he suffers the threefold miseries of material existence because he is influenced by the avidya, nescience potency, which covers his constitutional position. This living entity, covered by the influence of nescience, exists in different forms in a material condition. O King, he is thus proportionally freed from the influence of material energy to a greater or lesser degree. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is Satchitananda Vigraha. This means that he originally has 3 potencies: the pleasure potency, the potency of eternality, and the potency of knowledge. Together, these are called the Chit potency, and they are present in full in the Supreme Lord. For the living entities who are part and parcel of the Lord, the pleasure potency in the material world is sometimes displeasing and sometimes mixed. This is not the case with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because he is not under the influence of the material energy or its modes. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his original form, is full of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. The spiritual potency in these 3 portions, Sat, Chit Ananda, assumes these different forms. The three portions of the spiritual potencies are called Ladini, the bliss portion, Sandini, the eternity portion, and Samvit, the knowledge portion. We accept knowledge of these as full knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The spiritual potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead also appears in three phases: internal, marginal, and external. These are all engaged in his devotional service in love. In his spiritual potency, the Supreme Lord enjoys 6 kinds of opulences. You do not accept this spiritual potency, and this is due to your great impudence. We stop here for today, yeah? And tomorrow, Sripad Madhusudama Maharaj will continue further. Jai Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila Chapter 6, The Liberation of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Ki Jai. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Ki Jai. Om Vishnupad Shilai Shri Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Srila Gurudev.
Hari Raya Nama Krishna
Radhaya Nama Krishna Yadavaya Nama.
Shishi Kudu Goanga Walla Giri Tana Ju Kijai.
Jai.
Jai Vichi Papa and Hamsa Paravaja Kachara Vari Asata Sata Shishime. Tilak Nirhama Arj Kijai. Jai Vichi Papa and Hamsa Paravaja Kachara Vari Asata Sata Shishime. Should a Nirmala try Maharaj Kijai Jai. Paravaja Kachara Vari Asata Sata Shishime. Should back to Sunda Govinda Devi Maharaj Kijai.
Jai.
Jai Vichi Papa and Hamsa Paravaja Kachara Vari Asata Sata Shishime. Shri Bhaktivinoda Srita Dehi Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pai Paramahamsa Parivajika Jai Vai Asata Sata Shushima Shri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pai Shri Gauri Kishore Das Babiji Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pai Shri Sachitananda Shri Bhaktivinoda Thakur Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pai Shri Jagannath Das Babiji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Rupanuga Guru Vargas Ki Jai. Namachar Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Shri A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Shri Narottam Shamananda, Shri Navathacharya Prabhu Ki Jai. Shri Vishwanath Chakravarti Prabhu Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Das Thakur Ki Jai. Shri Krishnadas Kaviraj Ki Jai. Sarvashada Shri Nityananda Prabhu Ki Jai. Sarvashada Srimad Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shami Kanvana Kunagiri Godam Gopalchu Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Das Thakur Ki Jai. Shri Krishnadas Kaviraj Ki Jai. So, 13 Mahavani Ki Jai, Ganga Janamarji Ki Gandra, Grantavashima Bhagavatam Charitar Ki Jai, Vishwa Vaishnava Vajrasakha Ki Jai, Nitai Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai, all the assembled devotees Ki Jai, Jai Nitra Kirpaminandi Hari Hari Bol.